A 7-year-old girl stood in Judge Judy's courtroom and said 5 words nobody was ready for. "My mom cries every night." The plaintiff went pale. The defendant covered her mouth. And Judge Judy, the woman who has heard everything, stopped cold. She removed her glasses. She pressed her fingers against the bridge of her nose, and when she looked up again, her eyes were wet. What that little girl said next exposed a truth so devastating, this courtroom was never the same. The case number meant nothing. Docket 4471, small claims, a landlord-tenant dispute over a security deposit and alleged property damage. The kind of case that fills afternoon television like background noise, forgettable before it even begins. Nobody in the gallery expected anything beyond 20 minutes of arguing over carpet stains and late fees. But the woman who walked through the plaintiff's entrance changed that expectation before she reached the podium. Her name was Diane Olson, 43 years old. Former property manager for a small residential complex in Bakersfield, she moved with the stiff efficiency of someone accustomed to being in charge, clipboard energy without the clipboard. Her blouse was pressed, her posture military, and her mouth set in a line that suggested she had already decided how this case would end. Behind her, seated in the gallery's front row, was a girl, small, maybe 7, maybe 8. Brown hair pulled into a ponytail that was slightly off-center, the kind a child does herself when no one helps. She wore a yellow shirt with a daisy on it and sneakers that were clean but visibly too big, stuffed at the toes with what looked like tissue paper. She sat with her hands folded in her lap, feet dangling above the floor, watching everything with enormous brown eyes that moved slowly across the room like she was memorizing it. Nobody paid attention to her yet. The defendant entered from the opposite side, Rosa Salinas, 31. She walked the way people walk when their shoes hurt, not physically, but existentially. Every step carried something invisible and heavy. She was thin in a way that didn't suggest fitness, but rather meals skipped and sleep missed. Her hair was pulled back tight, and her outfit, a clean but faded navy blouse, looked like the nicest thing she owned, chosen carefully for today. She glanced at Diane once, and then looked straight ahead, the way people do when they've already lost arguments they haven't started yet. Judge Judy opened the file, flipped one page, then another. Her reading glasses sat low on her nose, and for maybe 15 seconds, she just absorbed the paperwork without expression. Then she closed the file and looked up. "Miss Olson, you're suing Miss Salinas for $2,800. "That's correct, Your Honor. "For damage to the apartment she rented from you and unpaid final month's rent." "Yes, she left the unit in terrible condition and skipped out without paying." Rosa's jaw tightened, but she said nothing. Her eyes stayed forward. Judy turned to her. "Miss Salinas, you filed a counterclaim for the return of your security deposit, $1,500. Rosa nodded. "Yes, Your Honor. She kept my deposit and I don't believe I owe her anything." "All right." Judy removed her glasses and set them on the bench. "Miss Olson, walk me through it." Diane squared her shoulders. She had clearly prepared for this moment. "Your Honor, Rosa Salinas rented Unit 7B in my building for approximately 14 months. During that time, she was late on rent 6 times. I was patient. I gave extensions. I even waived a late fee once because she claimed she had a family emergency." She paused, letting the word "claimed" do its work. When she finally vacated, the apartment was in unacceptable condition, stains on the carpet, holes in the drywall, kitchen cabinets damaged. The bathroom faucet was broken. "I have photos." She produced a manila envelope and handed it to the bailiff, who carried it to the bench. Judy opened it and spread the photos across her desk, examining each one without rushing. "These stains," Judy said, tapping one photo. "How old is this carpet?" Diane hesitated. A small hesitation, but Judy caught it. It was installed about 4 years before she moved in. 4 years. Judy set the photo down. "Continue. The drywall damage alone cost me $600 to repair. The carpet had to be replaced entirely, and she left without paying her last month's rent, which was $850. Did she give you notice before leaving?" "She gave me 5 days' notice." 5. "Our lease requires 30. Rosa's hands clenched at her sides, but she still didn't speak. She was waiting for her turn with the discipline of someone who had learned that interrupting gets you punished, not heard. Judy looked at the photos again, then at Diane. These holes in the drywall, what size are we talking about? Small, but numerous, like things were thrown or mounted improperly. Judy held up one photo, studying it. Her head tilted. These look like anchor holes. From shelves. Diane paused again. Well, they could be, but they still required repair. Anchor holes from shelves require spackle and paint, not $600. The gallery rustled. Diane's composure held, but her rhythm broke for a half-second. There were other damages. We'll get to those, Miss Salinas. Rosa looked up. She had been holding her folder against her stomach like a shield. Tell me your side. Rosa exhaled slowly, the kind of breath that carries months inside it. Your Honor, I moved into that apartment because it was the only thing I could afford that was close to my daughter's school. The building had problems from day one. The heat didn't work properly for the first 2 months. I reported it 3 times before anything was done. The bathroom faucet she's talking about, it was already leaking when I moved in. I told her about it during the walkthrough. Do you have documentation of that? Rosa opened her folder and pulled out a single sheet, a printed email. This is the email I sent her the day after I moved in. I described the faucet, the heater, and a crack in the bedroom window. The bailiff carried it to the bench. Judy read it silently. Miss Olson, Judy said, not looking up. She reported the faucet on day 1. Diane shifted her weight. I don't recall that specific email. It's dated. It's sent to your business address. And it describes a faucet leak in the bathroom, the same faucet you're now charging her for. Diane's expression tightened. Well, the condition worsened during her tenancy. Or it worsened because you didn't fix it. Judy set the paper aside. Continue, Miss Salinas. Rosa's voice steadied slightly. I was late on rent sometimes, yes. I won't lie about that. But every time I was late, I communicated with her. I never just disappeared. I always paid eventually, sometimes within the same week. And the carpet stains? Rosa lowered her eyes for a moment. My daughter spilled juice once. I cleaned it immediately, and there was one stain near the front door that was there when we moved in. I took a photo. She handed over her phone. The bailiff showed it to Judy, who examined the image closely. This is time-stamped the day of her move-in, Judy noted. She looked at Diane. You were aware of this pre-existing stain? Diane's jaw worked. I don't recall every minor detail. A stain you're charging someone hundreds of dollars for isn't a minor detail, the gallery murmured again. Diane's armor was developing small fractures, nothing dramatic, but visible if you knew where to look. Judy turned back to Rosa. Why did you leave with only 5 days' notice? This was the question Rosa had been dreading. Her posture changed, shoulders curving slightly inward, chin dropping a fraction. The shift was subtle but unmistakable. Because... She paused, choosing words carefully. Things had gotten very difficult. Difficult how? Financially, and... Another pause, longer this time. Personally. Judy watched her without pressing. The courtroom went quiet, not the manufactured silence of television drama, but the real, uncomfortable quiet that happens when someone is deciding whether to bleed in public. I was going through a very hard time, Rosa said finally. I needed to get my daughter somewhere more stable, quickly. More stable? Was the apartment unsafe? Not unsafe exactly, but there were issues Miss Olson refused to address. The heating, the window, and there was a mold problem in the bathroom that I reported twice. Diane cut in. There was no mold. Miss Olson. Judy's voice landed like a closed door. You'll have your chance to respond. Rosa continued. I left because I had to. I couldn't stay there anymore. And I knew if I waited 30 days, I wouldn't be able to afford the move at all. Judy examined the photos again, then the email, then Rosa's phone image. She was building something in her mind, a timeline, a pattern, a picture that neither party had fully painted. Miss Salinas, you mentioned your daughter. How old is she? 7. And she lived with you in this apartment? Yes, it's just the 2 of us. Judy nodded slowly. Then she turned to Diane with a question that seemed routine but carried an edge. Miss Olson, did you inspect the apartment before Miss Salinas moved in? Of course. And you documented its condition? a beat of silence. We did a general walkthrough. General. Judy repeated the word the way she repeats words that are doing too much work. Did you take photos? Not specifically of every. So you have no documented proof of the apartment's condition before she moved in. Diane straightened. It's standard practice. Standard practice is documentation, photos, a signed checklist. Do you have a signed move-in condition report? The silence that followed was Diane's answer. Judy tapped her pen once. Because Miss Salinas does have documentation, an email from day one, a time-stamped photo, and you have your memory. Diane's lips pressed together, holding back something that wanted to escape as frustration. Judy set her pen down and turned back to Rosa, and then she asked something that nobody expected, including Rosa. Miss Salinas, you said you needed to get your daughter somewhere more stable. Is your daughter here today? Rosa's breath caught. Yes, she's sitting in the gallery. Every head turned toward the small girl in the yellow shirt with the daisy. She sat perfectly still, watching the room with those enormous brown eyes. Her hands were still folded. Her two big sneakers still dangled above the floor. Judy looked at her for a long moment. The girl looked back, not shy, not scared, just present in a way that children rarely are in adult spaces. She seemed to understand that something important was happening, even if she couldn't name what it was. Judy turned back to Rosa. What's her name? Lily. And Lily was with you during all of this? The heating problems, the mold, the move? Yes. Rosa's voice had dropped almost to nothing. She was with me through everything. Judy made a note. Then she looked at Diane. Miss Olson, were you aware that a 7-year-old child was living in the apartment with heating issues and potential mold exposure? Diane's face went rigid. I addressed every maintenance request in a timely. You just told me you don't recall her email about the faucet, an email sent on day one. So let me ask again. Were you aware a child was living in conditions you failed to maintain? The question hung in the courtroom like something physical. Diane opened her mouth, then reconsidered. I was aware she had a child. But the urgency of a child in a cold apartment with mold didn't move your timeline? Diane said nothing. Judy shifted in her chair and looked at the file one more time. She was about to move on when Rosa spoke again, her voice cracking open in a way she clearly hadn't intended. Your Honor, I need to tell you something. Judy looked at her. Go ahead. The reason I left so quickly, the real reason, wasn't just the apartment. Rosa's fingers pressed against the edge of her folder until the tips went white. I lost my job 3 weeks before I moved out. The company I worked for shut down its local office. No warning, no severance. I went from making enough to survive to making nothing overnight. The courtroom was quiet, not dramatically, just quiet. I had maybe $1,200 saved, total, and I had to decide, do I pay rent for a month, or do I use that money to move my daughter somewhere I can actually take care of her? Her voice fractured on the last word. She pressed her lips together hard, fighting something back. Judy said nothing for a moment. Did you tell Miss Olson you lost your job? Rosa shook her head. No, I was embarrassed. I didn't want her to think I was making excuses. I just wanted to leave quietly and figure things out. And the security deposit? Rosa's eyes reddened. That $1,500. It's the only financial cushion I have left. I used most of my savings for the deposit on my new place. A room, not an apartment. A room, for me and Lily. She stopped. Her chest rose and fell unevenly. That deposit is the difference between us eating this month and not. Judge Judy removed her glasses slowly and set them on the bench. She pressed 2 fingers against the bridge of her nose and closed her eyes for exactly 3 seconds. When she opened them, she did not look at either party. She looked at the file, then at the photos, then at the email. Then she looked at Lily. The girl in the yellow daisy shirt sat perfectly still, watching, understanding more than anyone thought a 7-year-old could. I'd like to ask your daughter a question, Judy said quietly. Rosa's head snapped up. Fear passed across her face. Not fear of Judy, but the protective fear of a mother who has spent months shielding her child from adult catastrophe. Your Honor, I won't upset her. Judy's voice had changed. Not softer exactly, but different, like a key turning into a different lock. I just want to hear from her for a moment. Is that all right? Rosa looked at Lily. Lily looked at her mother. And then, without anyone telling her to, Lily slid off the bench and walked toward the front of the courtroom. Her sneakers made small sounds against the floor. The tissue paper inside them crinkled faintly with each step. She stopped a few feet from the bench and looked up at Judge Judy. Judy leaned forward slightly. Hi, Lily. Hi. Do you know why your mom is here today? Lily nodded. Because of the apartment. That's right. Can you tell me, did you like living there? Lily thought about it seriously, the way children do when they want to give an honest answer. It was cold sometimes, and the bathroom smelled funny. A ripple moved through the gallery. Diane's expression flickered, something between irritation and the first hint of genuine discomfort. What about your room? Did you have your own room? Lily shook her head. I slept with my mom, on the couch sometimes when her back hurt. Rosa pressed a hand over her mouth. Judy continued gently. Lily, is your mom a good mom? Lily nodded immediately, no hesitation. She's the best mom. Why do you say that? Because she always makes sure I eat first, and she reads to me even when she's really tired, and she braids my hair in the morning even though her hands shake sometimes. The courtroom had gone completely, naturally still. No manufactured drama, no narrator describing the silence, just people sitting with a truth they hadn't expected to encounter on a Tuesday afternoon. Then Lily said it, quietly, simply, without understanding the weight of her own words. But she cries every night. She thinks I'm asleep, but I hear her. She tries to be really quiet, but I can still hear. Rosa broke, not dramatically, not with a wail or a collapse. She simply bent forward at the waist, pressed both hands against her face, and made a sound that was barely audible. The sound of a person who has held everything together for so long that the breaking happens almost silently. Lily turned around and looked at her mother. Her small face shifted into something that no child's face should ever have to carry. The expression of someone who knows they've just said the unsayable thing, the thing that was supposed to stay secret because keeping it secret was how they protected the person they loved most. Mommy? Rosa couldn't answer. Her shoulders shook. Her breath came in fragments. Lily walked over to her mother, reached up, and placed one small hand on Rosa's arm. It's okay, Mommy. I'm not mad. Judge Judy was still. She had not moved. She had not spoken. Her hands rested flat on the bench, motionless. Her glasses sat untouched beside the file. Her jaw was set, and her eyes held something that viewers of her show had seen maybe a handful of times in decades, the visible, unmistakable effort of controlling a deep, emotional response. She blinked once, hard. She looked down at the file for a long moment. When she looked up again, her eyes were glassy. She did not wipe them. She did not acknowledge it. She simply breathed in slowly, exhaled through her nose, and spoke. Bring Lily a chair, please. The bailiff moved immediately, placing a chair next to Rosa. Lily climbed up and sat beside her mother, holding her hand with both of hers. Judy let the moment exist without interrupting it. She watched Rosa try to compose herself, and Lily try to comfort her, and she let the courtroom sit inside that image without rushing past it. Then she turned to Diane Olson, and the look on Judy's face was unlike anything she had shown all morning. Diane Olson stood behind her podium with her hands clasped in front of her, fingers interlocked so tightly the tendons surfaced beneath her skin. She had been watching Rosa and Lily with an expression that kept rearranging itself, irritation folding into discomfort, folding into something she clearly did not want to name. Judge Judy studied her for a long time before speaking, not the performative pause of someone building tension, the real pause of someone choosing their words with care because what comes next matters. Miss Olson, she said, how many units do you manage? Diane blinked, thrown by the question. 12. And how many of those tenants have children? I don't keep track of that specifically. You don't keep track. Judy picked up the photo of the apartment, the one showing the carpet stains. She held it at arm's length, looking at it the way a person looks at something they've already made a decision about. This carpet, 4 years old when she moved in, exposed to how many tenants before her? 2. 2 tenants over 4 years, and you're charging Miss Salinas for full replacement on a carpet that was already past its reasonable lifespan. Diane started to respond, but Judy kept going. The drywall, anchor holes from shelving, spackle and paint. A maintenance worker handles that in an afternoon for less than $100. You're billing her $600. There were the faucet, reported on day 1, documented in writing. You failed to repair it for 14 months, and now you're charging her for its deterioration. I repaired it after she left, after she was no longer your problem. Judy set the photo down with a quiet, definitive sound. Miss Olson, do you know what this looks like? Diane's chin lifted, a reflex, not confidence. It looks like a landlord trying to recover legitimate costs. No, it looks like a landlord trying to profit from a security deposit she never intended to return. The words landed across the courtroom and settled into every seat. Diane's mouth opened, then closed. She looked toward the gallery as if expecting allies, but the faces staring back offered nothing. Judy continued. I've seen this pattern before, more times than I can count. A tenant moves out. The landlord inflates damages, charges for pre-existing conditions, and keeps a deposit they know the tenant can't afford to fight for. It works most of the time because most people in Miss Salinas' position don't have the energy or the resources to show up in a courtroom. She tapped the file. But she showed up. Rosa was still wiping her face with the back of her hand. Lily sat beside her, feet swinging slightly, her hand still resting on her mother's arm. The girl's eyes moved between the judge and Diane with a focus that seemed too steady for a child, the kind of attention that develops when a kid learns early that adult conversations determine whether the lights stay on. Judy turned back to Diane. Let me ask you something direct. When Miss Salinas told you she was leaving with 5 days' notice, what did you do? I informed her she was in breach of the lease. Did you ask her why she was leaving so suddenly? Diane hesitated. That hesitation was louder than any answer. It's not my responsibility to investigate my tenants' personal lives. Nobody asked you to investigate. I asked if you asked, a simple human question. Is everything okay? Do you need more time? Did those words come out of your mouth at any point? Diane's silence filled the room the way water fills a crack, slowly, completely, irreversibly. No, she said finally. I didn't ask. Judy nodded once, not in agreement, in confirmation of something she already knew. Miss Olson, you had a tenant with a young child. That tenant reported maintenance issues from day 1. She paid her rent, sometimes late, but she paid. She communicated with you every time there was a problem. And when she finally reached a breaking point and had to leave, your response was not concern. It was a lawsuit. Diane's jaw set hard. You have a right to recover legitimate damages. You do not have a right to manufacture them. The word manufacture hung in the air. Diane looked like someone who had been slapped without being touched. Judy reached for the photos again. She spread them across the bench one more time, then looked at Diane over the frames of her glasses. I'm going to go through these one by one, and you're going to tell me, honestly, which of these damages existed before Miss Salinas moved in. Diane stiffened. Your Honor, you stated your version. Now I want the truth, and I promise you I can tell the difference. She held up the first photo, the carpet stain near the front door. This one, Miss Salinas has a time-stamped photo from move-in day showing this exact stain. Was this pre-existing? Diane's throat moved. It may have been, or was. A pause that lasted 3 full seconds. It was. Judy set the photo aside without comment. She picked up the next one, the drywall. These anchor holes. Were shelves mounted here by a previous tenant? Diane closed her eyes briefly. I'm not certain. You're the property manager. You oversaw the turnover? Were shelves mounted here before Miss Salinas moved in? Another pause. Yes. The previous tenant had floating shelves. And were those anchor holes patched before her move-in? Diane's face had gone from controlled to visibly strained. The performance of authority she had entered with was disintegrating in real time, not from one dramatic blow, but from the slow, relentless weight of specific questions she couldn't dodge. No, they were not patched. Judy set that photo aside, too. The faucet. She didn't even hold up a photo for this one. You know my question. Diane exhaled through her nose. The faucet had a slow leak before she moved in. How slow? It dripped. And over 14 months of dripping without repair, what happened to it? It got worse. Because you didn't fix it. Because maintenance was backed up and because you didn't fix it. Judy repeated the words at exactly the same volume, same tone. She didn't need to raise her voice. Repetition was enough. Diane stood perfectly still, the composure she had walked in with, the clipboard energy, the pressed blouse, the certainty that she was the reasonable party, had worn down to something thin and transparent. Underneath was not a monster, not a villain, just a person who had gotten used to a system that worked in her favor and never examined why. Judy gathered the photos into a neat pile and placed them on the corner of the bench. "Here's what I see," she said. "I see a landlord who failed to maintain a property, failed to document its condition, failed to repair reported issues, and then charged a departing tenant for every shortcoming she herself created." Diane tried one more time. "Your Honor, the lease clearly states..." "The lease states that a tenant is responsible for damages beyond normal wear and tear. Carpet that's 6 years old with stains from a previous occupancy is not her damage. Anchor holes from shelves she didn't install are not her damage. A faucet that was leaking before she signed the lease is not her damage." She paused. "What is her damage, Miss Olson? Show me. Show me one thing in this file that Rosa Salinas broke, destroyed, or neglected." Diane opened her mouth. Nothing came out. She looked down at her own hands as if hoping they held an answer she had forgotten to bring. The courtroom was not silent in the dramatic, breathless way of television. It was silent in the ordinary way, the way a room gets quiet when something true has been said and nobody has a rebuttal. Judy looked at Rosa, then at Lily. The girl had been watching the entire exchange with an expression that flickered between confusion and relief, the expression of a child who senses that someone is finally standing between her family and something unfair, even if she doesn't have the vocabulary to explain it. "Miss Salinas," Judy said, "I want to go back to something you mentioned earlier. You said you lost your job 3 weeks before you moved out." Rosa nodded, still composing herself. "Yes, Your Honor." "Where are you working now?" I found part-time work, cleaning offices in the evening, and I do alterations during the day. Sewing, hemming, whatever people need. 2 jobs. Yes. And Lily, when you're working evenings?" Rosa's face tightened. "My neighbor watches her, an older woman. She doesn't charge me, she just helps." "And your current living situation?" "We rent a room, in a house with 2 other families. We share the kitchen and bathroom." She said it without self-pity, without performance. She said it the way people say facts that are painful but unchangeable. "The sky is gray, the rent is due. We share a bathroom with strangers." Lily looked up at her mother when she said it. Then she looked down at her sneakers, the ones stuffed with tissue paper, and quietly tucked her feet under the chair, as if she could hide them from the conversation. Judy saw that too. "Miss Salinas, what would the return of your security deposit mean to you right now, practically?" Rosa pressed her lips together. She was trying not to cry again. "It would mean," she breathed, "it would mean I could buy Lily shoes that fit. It would mean I could pay my neighbor back for watching her. Not because she asked, but because she deserves it. It would mean I could stop choosing between the electric bill and groceries." The words didn't echo. They didn't need to. They just sat in the room, plain and heavy, the way truth often does when it has nowhere left to hide. Judge Judy picked up her pen. She held it still for a moment. Then she began to write. The courtroom watched her. The scratch of the pen against paper was the only sound. Even Diane, who had spent the last several minutes being dismantled, stood motionless, watching the judge write with an expression that had shifted from defensiveness into something approaching resignation. Judy finished writing. She set the pen down. She looked at both women. "I've heard enough." She removed her glasses and placed them beside the file. Her hands rested flat on the bench. "Miss Olson, your claim for $2,800 in damages is denied." Diane flinched but said nothing. "Every piece of damage you presented was either pre-existing, the result of your own failure to maintain the property, or the kind of normal wear and tear that a security deposit is not designed to cover. You provided no move-in documentation, no signed condition report, no evidence that contradicts Miss Salinas's records, which, I should note, are more thorough than yours." She paused, letting the ruling breathe. Furthermore, Miss Salinas's counterclaim for the return of her security deposit is granted in full. You will return the $1,500 to her. Rosa's hand flew to her mouth. Lily looked up at her, confused at first, then slowly understanding. Her small hand squeezed her mother's. Judy wasn't finished. And I'm adding an additional amount. Diane's head snapped up. What? $850. The final month's rent you claim she owes. I'm crediting that against the conditions she endured. 14 months of an unrepaired faucet, inadequate heating, and potential mold exposure that you ignored while collecting rent on time, most of the time, from a woman raising a child alone. Rosa stared at the judge, tears running freely now, but her expression was different from before. This wasn't the crying of someone overwhelmed by pain. This was something closer to disbelief. The disbelief of a person who has spent so long expecting the worst that fairness feels foreign. You owe her nothing, Judy said to Rosa. She owes you everything she withheld. Diane exhaled sharply. Your Honor, I believe. Miss Olson. Judy cut her off, but not harshly. Her voice carried something heavier than anger. I want you to look at that little girl. Diane turned reluctantly toward Lily. The child looked back at her with clear, brown eyes. She wasn't hostile. She wasn't sad. She was just there, present, visible, real. That child, Judy said, heard her mother cry every night, not because her mother is weak, but because her mother was fighting a battle on every front. Work, housing, money, dignity. And one of those fronts was you. Diane's face shifted. Something cracked behind her eyes. Not enough to spill over, but enough to show it was there. The recognition that she was not just a plaintiff in a legal dispute. She was part of a story that had a child sleeping in two big shoes and listening to her mother weep through thin walls. You had the power to fix that faucet, Judy said. You had the power to address the heating. You had the power to return a deposit that was rightfully hers. At every turn you chose your bottom line over her well-being. The law gives you rights as a property owner. It does not give you permission to be indifferent to the people living inside your walls. Diane blinked rapidly, her composure threatening to collapse. She didn't argue. She didn't defend. For the first time in the entire proceeding, she simply stood there and absorbed it. Judy turned back to Rosa. Miss Salinas, you came in here today clutching a folder and expecting to lose. I know that because I've seen that posture 1,000 times. People who've been ground down don't walk into courtrooms expecting justice. They walk in hoping for slightly less injustice. Rosa let out a breath that sounded like it had been trapped in her chest for months. You are not a charity case. You are not a victim who needs pity. You are a woman who worked, who paid, who documented, who reported problems, and who made an impossible decision to protect her daughter when the system around her failed. That's not weakness. That's the hardest kind of strength there is. Rosa nodded, wiping her eyes. Lily pressed against her side, face buried in her mother's sleeve. Judy picked up her glasses and put them back on. She straightened the file, aligned her pen beside it, and looked out across the courtroom with an expression that had settled back into its usual firmness, but with something underneath. A warmth she rarely displayed, visible only because of how far the morning had taken everyone. Miss Olson, you will submit payment within 30 days, the full amount. If there is any delay, any dispute, any attempt to withhold, I will refer this matter with my personal recommendation that the Housing Authority review your management practices across all 12 units. Diane nodded once, stiffly. Understood. Good. Judy picked up the gavel, but before she brought it down, she looked at Lily one more time. The girl had lifted her head from her mother's sleeve. Her ponytail was even more lopsided now. Her eyes were red around the edges. She had cried too, though nobody had noticed because she had done it quietly, the way she had learned. Judy held the girl's gaze for a moment. She didn't smile. That wasn't her way. But something in her expression softened just enough for the cameras to catch it. A slight nod, almost imperceptible. The kind of acknowledgement that says, I see you. You mattered here today. Lily nodded back, small, serious. Like a promise between two people who understood that some things don't need words. The gavel came down. Once, clean, final. Case dismissed. The sound echoed through the courtroom and faded into the ordinary noises of a room returning to normal. Chairs shifting, papers rustling, people standing and collecting their things. Rosa gathered her folder. Her hands were still shaking, but differently now. She stood and helped Lily down from the chair. The girl took her mother's hand and walked beside her toward the courtroom doors. Her sneakers crinkled softly with each step. Tissue paper compressing and releasing, a tiny sound that nobody else noticed, but that carried inside it the entire weight of what had just happened. At the door, Lily stopped. She turned and looked back at the courtroom one more time, at the bench, at the empty chairs, at the space where something had shifted for her family in a way she would not fully understand for years. Then she turned forward, squeezed her mother's hand, and walked through the door into the hallway light. Rosa did not look back. She didn't need to. For the first time in a long time, forward was